Hey friends, I hope you're doing well. Sorry I didn't post last week. I am currently in like the throes of midterms, which if you've been through college, you understand. Even high school, it's like similar stress level, I'd say. I haven't had as much time as I would like to dedicate to these kinds of things. So hopefully after this week is up, I'll have a bit more time to put some more effort into the videos. This is going to be a sit down and chat one. So I wanted to give you all an update on sort of what I'm reading and how I feel about what I'm reading and where I'd like to go for the rest of the year. I recently increased my reading goal to 52 books because I realized that I was actually ahead of schedule to achieve that, which wasn't something I planned on. My original reading goal for the year was like 26, I think. And I knew that was a bit low for a goal, but I wasn't really trying to push it too much. But yeah, now the goal is 52. I think I'm at 42 or 43 right now. So like roughly 10 books that I would have to read before the end of the year. I don't really particularly care about the goals. I think it's cool and I would like to achieve it, but it's not the end of the world if I don't. It's not my priority. All that aside, I just want to chat about kind of what I want the rest of the year to look like reading wise. I'll also show you some of the books that I'm hoping to read before the end of the year. There are a few that I'm like really looking forward to and actually really trying to insert into the stuff that I'm reading into the circulation, and other stuff that's like less of a priority, but I definitely do want to read at some point, just because I'm really excited about it. So a couple videos back, I mentioned the mega series that I'm working on. So what I essentially did with that is I created a TBR out of 3 book series. I used the Lord of the Rings, the First Law trilogy, and the Percy Jackson series. And the goal with that was to have a, I guess, more efficient way of reading all of those series, just because they're all series that were super high on my priorities. And I didn't want to have to read one series and then read the next series and then read the next series, because that just felt so long to me. So instead, what I did is I interspersed them together to have a little bit of variation and not needing to wait to finish one in order to start the next one. Looking back, there are ways that I would have changed the way that that's set up. So the way it's set up right now, it's First Law trilogy, Percy Jackson, Lord of the Rings, Percy Jackson, First Law trilogy, Percy Jackson, Lord of the Rings, Percy Jackson, and so on until you finish all 3 series. And I don't like that setup anymore. Now that I'm most of the way into it and kind of past the point of no return in terms of these series, I would have done it differently. I think I would have had it so that Percy Jackson is interspersed throughout, but I finish the First Law trilogy before I start the Lord of the Rings and just have Percy Jackson be what ties it all through, rather than having First Law and Lord of the Rings evenly dispersed throughout. I think that just makes it such a slow process to get through a single trilogy that it outweighs the benefit of having that sort of efficiency that I was going for. It just feels like so long since I started the First Law, and it's going to be at least 1 book before I finish it. So I got to finish The Two Towers and then read another Percy Jackson before I then start the 3rd First Law book. So yeah, there's really no good way to fix the bind that I put myself in. Lesson learned. I'm going to plan stuff differently in the future. But it's got me daydreaming about other books. Like I love Percy Jackson, love First Law, love Lord of the Rings. But I am just craving something else. Fantasy is my favorite genre. Maybe neck and neck with sci-fi in terms of my favorite genre. I love having variation, and the mega series just isn't conducive to any variation. I'm not a TBR person. I think that's what I've learned here. In the past, I've been 100% mood reader, and I've loved, this just isn't working for me. So in the future, I'm just going to read what I feel like when I feel like it, and I think I'll be a lot happier. So to start out, what I'm also currently reading along with The Two Towers is A Fisherman of the Inland Sea by Ursula Le Guin. This is one of her short story collections, and I am loving it. Short stories are super nice to pair with the longer epic fantasy books, just because you can get through a single story a lot faster, and it feels like fulfilling, and it's a complete narrative. It's like taking a break from homework to scroll TikTok is kind of what that feels like. I guess, I don't know why I'm holding up the book because it only says the title on the spine. This is a library copy. If you're in college, check out your university library and see if they have Le Guin's work, because I'm betting they do. A lot of her work is, while it's written for popular audiences, is super academic, just in its content. So I bet you'll be able to get them for free because, lots of libraries have them. I also checked out a bunch of other Ursula Le Guin that I also really want to read, and they're all due on December 16th, so we'll see if I can fit them in. But I've got Buffalo Gals by Ursula Le Guin. I've also got 4 Ways to Forgiveness by her, and The Eye of the Heron, as well as The Beginning Place by her. So all seem really good. They're all sci-fi in one way or another. I believe, is this part of the Hainish cycle? I don't know. I'll have to check on that. I think 4 Ways to Forgiveness is in the Hainish cycle, but I'm not sure. And actually, a few of the short stories in A Fisherman of the Inland Sea are also in the Hainish cycle. So it's cool to have some like canon material in here as well. So all those Ursula Le Guin books I really want to read, and hopefully I won't have to return them before I do. Next one I want to talk about is Mort by Terry Pratchett. I've heard fantastic things about Discworld. I was able to get this at my favorite bookstore ever, the Yankee Bookshop in Woodstock, Vermont. So if you're not familiar, Discworld is a fantasy world that is flat, and it rests on the backs of elephants who ride on the back of a giant sea turtle in space. It's very much an absurdist series. I think there are over 40 books in it, but I think normally a massive series like that would turn me off, but I think the fact that there's not a whole lot of pressure to read all of them is very sort of comforting to me. And I feel like I can just dip my toe in with a good starting point book and not necessarily feel the pressure to read all 40. So that's really appealing to me. I've also heard that Terry Pratchett's depiction of like the Grim Reaper, death, is just one of the best that there's ever been. I've heard that Terry Pratchett got letters from fans on their deathbed saying they hope that death is like Pratchett wrote them. Just that level of impact on individuals is something that I search for in books. I want to be impacted like that. I think that really speaks to the power of literature as a whole, and specifically the merits of this series, which I'm hoping to find out for myself if that resonates as much with me. So this is one that I'm very much looking forward to. Kind of along the same vein with absurdist stuff is The Restaurant at the End of the Universe, which is the second book in the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy series by Douglas Adams. This one's super short, and I think so is Mort. It's pretty short, and I think they'll help me get to my reading goal, which would be so nice. I could use some shorter books on the list. I loved the first one. I read it in January 2021, so it's been a little while since I read that, but I would just love to dive back into this and have some laughs, and also get reminded of how absurd the universe really is and how okay that is. That's one of the big takeaways that Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy is known for, and I could use that reminder, I think. The Great Gatsby. I never read this in high school. I feel like that's like a universal high school experience, but I wasn't in the class that read it, so I never got to read it. So Great Gatsby is one I want to check out. Literary fiction is something that I'm craving with all this fantasy. Continuing the literary fiction trend, The Goldfinch by Donna Tartt. I read the Secret History by her earlier this year, and I'm very much looking forward to seeing some more of her prose. I've heard that this one is a bit too long. It could be trimmed down and be just as good or better, but I think that this is a book that I'd be willing to put myself through that length of, just for the good things that I've heard about it. It's not as hyped as The Secret History, so I don't know if it has sort of as much popular appeal, I guess, so we'll see if I like it, but I'm curious enough that this is one that I definitely want to check out. It's something that would excite me to start, I think, and that's kind of the point here. Pet Sematary by Stephen King. I've never read horror before. I've never read any Stephen King, and this one I've heard just raving reviews about. I've heard that it is absolutely terrifying. Provides some like really solid commentary on grief. While I don't personally love to be scared by the media that I consume, like I'm not a huge horror movie person. That's not what I seek. I see the value of it in being able to have stand-ins for things like grief and show the ways that we process this, these kinds of things, and sort of lay bare those human emotions. Something that I'm super curious about and want to experience for myself to find out if I like it. I know I don't like horror movies that much, but maybe horror books will, because it's not like the scary content that I don't like about horror movies. I don't know. I feel like a lot of the popular horror movies that I've seen I've walked out of it feeling like I didn't experience a good story and I was just scared. If you're a big horror movie fan, I'm sorry. I just don't appreciate it on the story level nearly as much as other people get from it. So I'm hoping that a horror book might have that for me. I don't mind being scared if there's a great story attached, is what I'm trying to say. Beijing Coma. This one is massive, and I've had it since Christmas 2020. And I still haven't read it. It terrifies me. So Ma Jian is a really great writer. I read his book, China Dream, I believe in 2019, which was the first book I had read in a while. But yeah, China Dream was really solid. I went into it thinking it was going to be heavily sci-fi, but it ended up being a lot more historical fiction focused. It was like so impactful about things that I had never experienced and will never experience. It was like unpacking the trauma of a whole like generation in China, which is something that I feel like as Americans we're not exposed to a ton. I know a bit more about it because I've studied a lot of that, but the average American has no idea what happened in the Cultural Revolution. And the way that he talks about that and shows the literal PTSD of that era in his main character, and that is so impactful. And even then, that's not considered his masterpiece. This is. So I believe it follows a protagonist who wakes up from a coma directly following the Tiananmen Square massacre. So as you can tell, he's pretty outspoken in his critique about the Chinese government. So do with that what you will. He's been exiled. He lives in London, I believe. So very much like a counterculture icon, I guess. And I'm curious about this book because China Dream was super impactful, and we'll see how Beijing Coma is. I feel like this is also going to be one that could be trimmed down because it is just chunky. I guess it's only 600 pages. That's shorter than I thought, but still, it's a lot of words. And last but not least, The Thousand Crimes of Ming by Tom Lin. So this follows a Chinese-American outlaw/cowboy type figure in the American West. And if you didn't know, that's historically accurate. There were a lot of Chinese immigrants and descendants thereof in the American West, especially building railroads and things like that. There's so much history to unpack there that I won't go into right now, but I think it'll be really cool to read a story that's from the perspective of someone in that situation. I've heard that this is just like a bloody book. Like there's a lot of violence and death and stuff. So that's been a critique of it, actually. So we'll see if I like that aspect. I'm typically not turned off by that too much. But we'll see if it's anything excessive, I guess. We shall see. I've also heard that there are some mild, low fantasy elements to it too. So I'm curious. My interest is piqued, and this is fairly short. So it's one that I've been wanting to get to for a while and just haven't been able to. So thank you for watching this video. I'm going to try and come back with some more scripted, put together, nicely laid out videos in the near future, but this week that's just been unattainable. But thank you so much for watching. I appreciate you being here. And a special thank you to the patrons of this channel over on Patreon. I'll put their names up here. There are just two of them. Thank you so much to both of you for your continued support of the channel. And I will see you all in the next video. Peace.